Welcome, everyone, to DEI After 5, the show that focuses on topics across diversity, equity, and inclusion with some of the brightest minds in the industry. Here's your hostess, inclusive culture curator and coach, Sacha Thompson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of DEI After 5. Okay, so if you know anything about me, my career, all the things that I have done, you know that my last job in corporate was doing inclusive marketing for a big tech company. And, one of the challenges that I ran into was at that time, there was this mindset that DEI only lived in HR. HR was only the only part of the organization that should touch DEI. So today we are going to talk to Sheryl Daija, who is part of an organization that is really focused on DEI marketing and a trade association that's focused on it. And so before I go any further, I want to bring Sheryl in. So Sheryl, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Sacha, for having me. I really appreciate it.
So Sheryl, tell us first of all about you and who you are and how you got into this, and then talk to us a little bit about this trade association.
Yes. Okay, so I was born in South Africa. I lived under the apartheid regime. And so at a very early age, I understood what inequities looked like. And that spurred my passion for social justice. So I was always committed to social justice in all its forms. And when I came to the US, I thought that I was going to see something very different. But, obviously there were differences, but, still inequities. I'm also part of a multiracial family. I see the world through my son's eyes. And so it's very personal for me to change the trajectory of opportunities that are available for Black and brown people in this country. And certainly for the next generation. So that's my personal background. My professional background is I'm a consummate marketer. I started my career in the health and beauty aid industry. I was recruited into the technology industry. And then after 9/11, I found myself recruited into the industry trade group world. And I quite frankly I wasn't even familiar with industry trade groups at that time. But I ended up being the general manager for the IAB, which is the Interactive Advertising Bureau, and then most recently the chief strategy officer at the MMA, which is focused on mobile marketing. And as part of my role, I was able to bring together, right, the power of industry trade groups is bringing together the industry to create marketing platforms, to create a marketplace of, buying and selling media, etc. And so after the murder of George Floyd, I had the distinct pleasure and honor of being introduced to a number of chief diversity officers at that time. And we ended up, it was a time, right, like when everyone wanted to just kind of be together. Mm-hmm. COVID was kind of happening. And so we would meet every few weeks. We would just meet as a group. And it occurred to me in those conversations that being a chief diversity officer in corporate America is a lonely road. A lot of times, as you just said, right, they were on the outside of business and they were told to fix things. And it wasn't really their job, right, to fix.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, well, why would we not use the power of an industry trade group to drive change against a purpose as opposed to just building platforms for marketers? And so Bridge was born out of that. And so, as you said, we are now the first independent DE&I trade group for the global marketing industry.
I just wish I would have met you some years ago to be a part of this. Because, as you were saying, these chief diversity officers, being brought in to fix things, I was told that my job was to make things look pretty because I was in marketing. And I was like, that's not what I do. But
No.
And so I appreciate the fact that, it is a trade association. It is not just a marketing trade association, but that focus on diversity and inclusion. And so, what makes that different than like the American Marketing Association or any other,
Yeah.
association that's focused on marketing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, our North Star is really about inclusion. And so I should say that BRIDGE is an acronym for belonging, representation, inclusion, diversity. The G is the gap in all of those things. And then the E is equity. And our mission is really about moving the narrative of DE&I away from philosophy to operationalizing inclusion as a business practice. So our North Star is that. Our North Star is not necessarily marketing per se, because we believe that inclusion needs to cross the entire organization, marketing included,
Mhm.
but everywhere from organizational practices all the way to advocacy.
Yes.
And so the way that we come at it is that we look at the business practices. Our goal is really about operationalizing inclusion, as I said, as a business practice, not a philosophy anymore.
Yeah.
And to your point, Sasha, what that does is it removes the dependency of DE&I from an individual personal function, and it places it squarely on everyone in the organization, right? And so I can talk a little bit about a framework that we've created, but I'll let you, maybe ask other questions and then we can get there.
No, I mean, I would love to hear this framework because you are speaking my language, right? I have always been one that said this needs to be a part of the DNA of the organization.
That's right.
If something happened to the one person that's responsible, it should not make everything else fall apart. And so one of the things that we're noticing right now is so many organizations are letting go or cutting back the resources or funds to their diversity and inclusion offices, their chief diversity officers, etc. And people are just like, okay, so if that's gone, what else do we do? And it's like, it should be part of your DNA. It should be part of your everyday operations, regardless of which department you're a part of. And it goes beyond your employees. Like,
That's right.
how is it impacting the industry that you're a part of? How is it impacting your customers and clients? All of those things. And so, like I said, you're speaking my language. So, tell us a little bit about this framework, because I think, many of the people that listen to this show are, some are DEI practitioners, some are in HR or in culture teams, and some are just leaders, within their organizations that want to be more inclusive. And so if you could share that framework so people have an understanding of, okay, these are some things I need to be considering or thinking about.
Yeah. So, okay. So we decided kind of early on when we when we created Bridge, and it should be said that we're still a young organization. We're not yet a toddler, but we're courageous, so we act like teenagers. And so very early on, I was connected. So I had worked in a past project with an incredible professor of marketing at Emory University, Dr. Omar Rodrigo Villa. And I was talking to him when I was creating Bridge, and I said, Omar, what research can we do that will change the trajectory and start to allow people, everyone in every company, to understand that inclusion is the job of all and not the job of one. And so together we created a research program called Voices of Inclusion. And what we wanted to do was to understand what the business practices were that contribute to equities or inequities in the marketplace. We focused on the marketplace because clearly there would be dependencies on the workplace, and there's not a lot of research out there on the marketplace, right?
Right.
And so if you're an inclusive brand in the marketplace, then you're obviously doing some pretty good stuff in the workplace. So we interviewed about 50 chief diversity officers, chief marketing officers, and CEOs. And what I should say, just as a kind of aside, Sasha, I think it's important, is if you look at the Bridge board of directors, you'll see an intersection between chief diversity officers. So we have like the chief diversity officer from Discover Financial and Unilever and Nielsen. But then we have the marketing leaders from Colgate and Indeed and Campbell's. And then we have CEOs from a number of different companies. because we believe, again, this is kind of acting out on our mission, is that the change needs to happen at that intersection of DE&I, marketing and business. So we were intentional about how we built the board. In the same way, we interviewed that cross-functional section of leaders, CDOs, CMOs, and CEOs to uncover what the business practices were that, as I said, contribute either to equities or inequities in the marketplace. And we know that there are a lot of inequities, right? Whether it's getting a mortgage or leasing a car or walking down the beauty aisle in a supermarket or a or a pharmacy. And through that research, we literally uncovered 72 business practices across 5 dimensions of the organization.
Okay.
So the pillars that we focused on were organization practices, marketing management practices, commercial practices. So maybe I'll back up for a second. Organization practices is laying the foundation, right? Like who's your team, etc. Marketing management practices is about how do you see the market? How do you segment your marketplace? How do you understand the communities that are in you want to target in your market? How do you create more potential communities that you're not currently talking to and marketing to? And then on the marketplace side, there's commercial practices. And the commercial practices is how do you serve your market, right? What are the products and services that you create? The pricing, how do you develop products with different communities in mind? Then we have marketing communications practice, which obviously, how do you communicate? How does your brand show up in the marketplace? And then advocacy practices, which is obviously, how do you advocate for the community, et cetera, that you're serving? So the research revealed these 72 business practices across 5 dimensions, and the academic team, which by the way, Omar brought in professors from Emory. So he's from Emory University, then from the University of Georgia and Indiana University. So it was like some of the best academic minds that are out there. And we said, okay, so now what do we do with this research that it can make it actionable? Because everything that Bridge does, we want to make it actionable. So we converted the research into an inclusion maturity assessment tool, which is called, which Bridge has now called IMAX. And IMAX is inclusion maturity assessment and capability building. Because what was important to us was not only for companies to see where they are, but also to understand how they can get to increased inclusion maturity, right? How do they build capabilities internally to improve their inclusion maturity? So a company would take the assessment, and by the way, you can do the assessment at both the company level and at the brand level.
Okay.
So a company like Sephora has done the program with us. They did it at the company level. A company like Campbell's, who has obviously a portfolio of brands,
right?
They chose to start with 2 brands, and what was really interesting was that one of the brands had a higher inclusion maturity than the other. So what they could see, right, was that they had a core competency in the organization. It just wasn't extending across the organization. So when a company will take the assessment, right, they will get an overall brand inclusion maturity score. Where are they against, on the scale of inclusion from a maturity perspective? And then they will get very granular scores against each one of those business practices. And we can do it for both B2C companies and B2B companies. So whether you're a consumer-facing brand or whether you're a company that is a B2B company, we can do the same, because it doesn't matter what industry you're in. Inclusion as a business practice must become part of a business imperative for every company.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, because I was just listening to the brands that you were talking about, and again, because I'm a marketer, I was a marketer. I used to work with consumer product goods quite a bit, and so when I was hearing the companies that you're naming, I'm like, okay, so this may work best with CPG type companies, but you're saying no, this could be products, this could be services, this can be any organization,
retailers. We're actually in the process. we're actually in the process of adding a sixth pillar, which is going to be the in-store experience, because right, it's really important. We know that there's unfortunately a lot of discrimination in how different people are treated within within the store experience. And so we're going to add now a sixth pillar, which is business practices that contribute to equity within the in-store experience. And we're working, with Sephora and a number of retailers to do that. So yeah, it's a very flexible assessment where we will customize it, right? So obviously, Sephora's commercial practice is going to be different than Campbell's commercial practices.
Right.
So we go in and we understand the company and we customize it. What's really, I think, powerful about the process is that you can have information within 6 weeks. This is not a long, drawn out, lengthy assessment where you need 300 people taking it. This is where you need like cross-functional, very good representation across both, gender, racial, differing abilities, etc., different, kind of seniority, right? So you want leaders and associates. But the truth is, if you get 30 to 40 people within your organization taking the assessment, you'll get a very true reading of where you are on the scale of inclusion maturity. Now, what I think you'll really love is one of the pieces that we have seen now consistently as a gap, right? Because obviously, once you get the assessment done, you can see where your gaps are, right? You're going to be high maybe in certain business practices, a little lower in others. Well, one of the consistent gaps is inclusive marketing.
Hello.
So, right, because the world has changed so much, right? I mean, the racial diversity in our country has. I mean, let's just talk about the US for a second, right? The racial diversity in our country has changed so much. I mean, what does multicultural marketing even mean anymore, right? You have white people over here, and then you have everybody else over here. Like, it just doesn't make sense for the world that we live in. So that has been identified as a major gap, and we were thankfully proactive, and we actually have launched an inclusive media development committee. We held our first meeting yesterday, and I was very excited because we had 45 companies participate in the meeting. And the conversation was really interesting and rich because it's really time now to start to redefine, what does general market mean?
Yes.
How do you look at the marketplace? How do we as brands and marketers start from a different perspective than we have been doing media with, right? Or marketing, right? Because again, the tapestry of our racial makeup of this country is changing, and quite frankly, there can be as many governors as they need to attack DE&I. The change is inevitable. I mean, change is inevitable, right? You can't fight inevitable,ity, right?
Yeah.
So
no, go ahead. Because you're speaking my language.
Because I know we could go down that path too. But I'll finish my point. My point was that there is an inevitability to how the world is going to look, right?
Yeah.
And if marketers don't start paying attention to that, it's a cautionary tale, right? We've seen it already start happening, right? You've got companies like Bevel, who Tristan Walker talks about, who was the founder of Bevel. He doesn't talk about the fact that razors were going to be this huge marketplace for him. He talks about the inequities of walking down the aisle and not being able to find a single blade razor, or let's just say a quality single blade razor, right?
Yeah.
Fenty, right? Cosmetic companies decided that they weren't going to make products for Black women.
Nope.
So now you got $1 billion company that is. We must start to respect and raise the voices of chief diversity officers and bring them into the opportunity to create business impact. They are a wealth of just unbelievable value and knowledge, and they bring a lens to the business that not everyone can bring. And it's not just enough to be a person of color. It's not just enough to be a Black person or LGBTQ or Asian or Latino. DE&I leaders have a very different lens to everything, right? They bring a lens that is so critical to business. And honestly, the value that I see just sitting at the board meeting with our chief diversity officers, I have learned so much about how to look at the world differently through their lens and through the way that they think about the world. And the marketers on our board have learned so much from them. So one of the things that I love about IMAX is that it kind of unlocks this collaboration between chief diversity officers, CMOs, and CEOs, because it kind of puts everything on a level playing field, right? Where everybody can collaborate in building inclusive brands, and everyone has their role in doing that. I mean, I personally think CMOs should be talking to their chief diversity officers at least once a week, if not like every day. And I've heard stories where CEOs can't even get meetings with their CMOs.
Yeah.
So it's really, and then I've heard, the flip side, and you see the magic unfold when that collaboration happens. So
yeah, my belief is that the chief diversity officer should actually be right under the CEO, and then the chief operating and chief marketing should report into the chief diversity officer. That's just my thought.
Wow. Well, I like that. I like it. Yeah.
That's just my thought. Because if it's supposed to be infused in everything,
it's got to be.
It has to be at the top.
Yeah. I think I'll just add one other thing. I think what IMAX also does is, it moves the conversation away from opinions and beliefs, and it puts it into business practices, right? So exactly, data. So, we can stop arguing about whether it's a moral imperative or it's not a moral imperative, or we're taking jobs away or we're not, or it just, none of that matters. The issue is, what are your business practices that are contributing to an inclusive brand?
Yeah. I love this framework. I love this, this index, this assessment that you have, because again, it's not just, this is just a marketing tool. This is like a holistic view of your organization, from employees to customers to industry, like all of the things that I said earlier, right?
Exactly.
This is a way to measure that and to show those gaps in how you may or may not be showing up. And one of the biggest challenges that I had in doing inclusive marketing, well, two of the biggest challenges that I had was, one, exactly what you just said, was, marketing should just put a black and a brown face on something and call it a day. And I'm like, no, that's not what we're about to do here. Like, it needs to be intentional. It needs to be authentic. It needs to be representative of the cultures and the communities that we are touching. It can't just be, for lack of a better term, blackface on, everything else that you've already done. The other thing that I appreciated about what you said was kind of the knowledge and information that true chief diversity officers that are practitioners bring to the table, from a business perspective, because they do see things more holistically. And again, one of the challenges that I have an MBA in management. I've done marketing. I've done strategic alliances and partnerships. And so to be told by someone, you're marketing, your job is just to make things look pretty, was very frustrating.
Yeah.
But it also kind of told me, this is where this organization sees this work.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it is just a check the box. We're just going to do the bare minimum. And so there was this idea that anybody can do inclusive marketing. And I'm like, that's not quite how this works. But and so I appreciate, Bridge bringing together not just folks that are passionate about this work or this space, but are in key strategic aspects of the business, especially your board, of, okay, this is how we need to look at this holistically. This is how we need to make sure that we are doing all the things that we need to do across all industries, so that there's a baseline, right, for this. I cannot think of any organization that has thought about this from, I think you had the advocacy. They may think of advocacy as one part of their business. They may stick it in ERG.
That's right.
They may stick it over there, or commercial, they're not necessarily thinking of it in this way, or if they are, it's stuck over in one other part of the business. This is truly a holistic view of how are you showing up inclusively across the board as an organization.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Because you were mentioning Sephora, and Sephora is known to be, especially these last few years, much more inclusive. You go into access, like who they're partnering with to create access, the models, the folks that they have working in the stores, like all of these things, they've been very intentional over the last few years. Or have you seen organizations that take this index and realize, like, oh crap, we aren't where we thought we were, and to get to where we thought we are, like closing that gap just seemed impossible? Have you seen organizations that kind of have those aha moments?
Yeah. So I have so many things that I want to say to you because of the things that you just said. So I'm gonna rewind and then I'm gonna come back. But
okay,
what you had said about it's not enough just to put a black face right on an ad, and I call that diversity without inclusion. Because so often we'll see ads where there's, I mean, again, back to the razor example, I'm not picking on the razor industry, but you'll see an ad with a black guy using a razor. And okay, great. So there's a black guy in the ad, but it's a razor that he would never use.
right.
So that is, from my perspective, that's diversity without inclusion. And what I should tell you, and this really is actually going to take us down a whole nother path, but I do want to share it because it's just so, you're going to really, I think, react to it. So we're in the process of doing analysis against social media marketing for the top 200 brands to measure. So our goal is to have inclusion become a new brand metric. I'm just going to put it out there. Okay.
I love it. Yes.
Okay. So, and we're going down that path. So IMAX certainly is the first way to do that, right? Because we're measuring inclusion across the entire organization. So, but we also want to make inclusion visible. What does that mean? Is we want to be able to show where companies are in terms of their social media marketing. And we're starting with social media because we think that it's representative of most marketing, but we will get to linear TV, etc. And what we're doing is we're measuring the inclusion against skin tone or skin type, right? We're measuring inclusion against body type, hair type, and then differing of abilities. And if I could share the presentation and the data with you, you'd be like, oh my gosh. So what we have found is that essentially brands are 23 years behind. I'll say it again, 23 years behind against the current racial diversity in this country. 23 years behind. Now, so
I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's alarming, but it's not surprising, right?
Yeah.
So what that means is, and listen, we do know that there has been progress. I don't want to say that there hasn't been progress because there has been progress, and there are companies that are doing it well. Dove, for example, exceeds, right, the racial diversity, right? But you have an AC Eggleston Bracey leading that, right? So what's interesting is that what we have seen, and I do want to make the point, we're not here to name and shame, right? We are here to help companies do better. We're here because we fundamentally believe, other than the fact that it's a moral imperative, that it's a business imperative. The amount, there's $5 trillion in buying power from Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, Indigenous Americans. You cannot find that growth from just organically continuing to go after the same market, right? So you have $5 trillion in buying power. You must get this right if you're a brand. And so we're here really to help, right? And we're not here to name and shame. But to your point, yes, brands go, wow, I really thought I was doing better. Or can you help me identify, where I've kind of, where the gaps are, right? Which is where you then go back to IMAX and you see that certain practices are not contributing to, the higher maturity of inclusion. And companies are, kind of, there are obviously there are companies that are higher in some practices, lower in other practices. Commercial practice, as you just identified, is one place that we are seeing pretty big gaps, right?
Yeah.
Because and we know that because we see it in the marketplace, we see the inequities. So this definitely is helping. Campbell's is now going to the next level with us, which is where we're really sitting with them and saying, okay, here are your gaps. Here's where we would focus, right? Because you need to be, listen, it's not going to happen overnight. You need to be intentional about where you focus. And then Bridge is really committed to building helping companies build the capabilities, right? Through things like the Inclusive Media Development Committee, we will create best practices for companies to do more effective inclusive marketing, because we have to deconstruct that entire ecosystem in order to build it back up and build it on structures that are more equitable, right? Because they're just not right now. The metrics are not equitable. The currency is not equitable, right? You could go into every piece of it. So that's why I'm excited, because it's a framework that allows people to see where they are. It allows companies to kind of say, okay, well, we would like to be here. How can you help us get there?
Right. Sheryl, I could talk to you all day about this stuff, because this is my, yes, I love it. This is my passion. This is what I loved doing. I just didn't like being in corporate doing it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, then now with IMEX, maybe you would have had a better experience.
We'll talk.
Yeah.
So I want to do a little bit of a pivot. So
yeah, please.
How do you fill your cup? What are the things that you do to take care of yourself? Because this is a lot of work. And I'm just listening to everything that Bridge does. And you said, this started 3-4 years ago?
No. We launched publicly April of 2022. So we've really been a year and a half. Yeah. We were obviously working behind the scenes, and we had specific milestones that we wanted to meet before we, brought it out into the public. But and I think it's a testament to the people that are involved and to the need, right, in the industry.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So how do you fill your cup? How do you take care of yourself? Because that's a heavy lift in 18, plus months.
Yeah. Well, I spend a lot of time on the soccer field watching my son play soccer. So that's my joy. I do a lot of, I guess, alternative healing, where I, just kind of every week, just take time and just, check in with myself and make sure that I'm grounded. But I'm, I don't even feel I don't feel tired, and I don't feel overwhelmed. I feel hugely motivated. I have the best job in the world. I get up every morning. I absolutely love what I do. I'm surrounded by amazing board members that always check in on me and say, they're just right. That's the other thing about chief diversity officers. They just know what to do.
Yeah.
They check in. They, before you have a conversation, right? They'll be like, okay, but before we get to that, you're like, how are you doing? And it's really it's just a shift in how you do business, right? That certainly wasn't my experience in any of my other roles, right? So yeah, I think the work in of itself just keeps me energized and motivated. And as I say, I have the best job in the world right now.
Yeah,
I really do.
Absolutely. So if people wanted to find out, more about Bridge or get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. You can reach out to me directly. I am Sheryl, SHERYL @wearebridge.com. That's my email. Our website is www.wearebridge.com. I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, feel free to reach out to me. I make myself very accessible because I learn something from every person I talk to, and I want everyone to be part of Bridge. We're building an army. We need to be powerful so that we can drive the change. And we're focused on driving systemic change. I'm not interested in, putting little, kind of small changes. We're ready to drive the big changes.
Big, audacious, hairy changes. I love it.
One of the things that I always say to my team is, we will be courageous, and we will always continue to be courageous,
Yeah.
and be on the right side of history.
Yes.
So,
Sheryl, thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you for sharing everything with us today. Again, as somebody who was in the inclusive marketing space,
yeah,
this just warms my heart to see the focus and the intentionality behind it. And it's coming from marketing, and it's not coming from other parts of the business, but that's a whole other conversation. So thank you so much for everything that you are doing. And thank you all for watching this episode of DEI or listening in on this episode of DEI After 5. I hope that you were able to take away a nugget or two that you can really start to be intentional about making sure that your organizations are more inclusive in more holistic ways. You can find us here every Tuesday at 5:15 p.m. right here on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And until next time, have a good one.